as well as our guests. Very glad to have you here tonight for this session. My name is Zeynep Yalımuzun, and I will be hosting this session with Murat Yeşildere, who's my fantastic guest, a dear friend. I've known him for a long time and a big champion of diversity and equality. So we will be picking his brains on how to win male allies for our diversity cause. But before we go on to that, for those of you that may not be familiar with us, we are European Women on Boards. We are a nonprofit organization that's geared towards diversity, gender diversity, especially in the business world. And in fact, we have our chair, Edwidge Nayans, with us today. She was kind enough to offer for those interested in European Women on Boards a session right after this one. So if you would be interested to learn more about us and our activities, Edwidge will be with you in this main room after the session, if you would like to stay behind and ask her some questions and get to know a little bit more about us. So thank you so much, Edwidge, for doing that. And also there will be a session with Murat for those who signed up. That will be afterwards as well, and you will be redirected to that session. I can see there's a lot of excitement in the chat, as always. This is our EWOB tradition. We are very active on the chat. So please put all your questions, thoughts, comments in the chat. I have two wonderful ladies who will help me to moderate the chat today with me. I have Tamara and Christina, and they have agreed to kindly to post your questions through the chat when the time comes. So that's kind of how the show will work. So just to warm up to the process, first of all, I'd like to just say a few words about Murat. As I said, I've known him for a long time. He's a big champion of women and diversity, as well as being one of the managing directors of Egon Zehnder in Turkey. And he has actually been the founder of Women in Boardrooms in Turkey, amongst other organizations. So very active in this field. And Murat, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm glad that we will be able to get learnings from you. So maybe just to start, Murat, if you would like to tell us a little bit about your own personal journey. How did you become interested in this topic, and why are you such a champion of women and diversity?
Well, first of all, thank you. I am humbled to be invited for this event, and thank you for coming here, all of you, joining us today. What I do in Egon Zehnder is actually evaluating the leadership capabilities and potential of senior executives in different industries. And I'm in people business, and making judgment calls is probably the crucial part of my business. And when doing that, and I'm doing this for the past 23 years now, I started when I was about 5 years old, so it took me some time to come here. You can understand from my looks. But when I started this, it was not that much of a big concern or conflict for me that my clients evaluate people or perceive people the way I perceive them or evaluate their leadership capabilities. But after some years passing by, I start noticing unconscious biases when people make their judgments about people. And interestingly, the topic that we have here, which is diversity and inclusion and also gender equality, this is a topic not that much easily expressed explicitly, but it's more expressed implicitly. So when we are given a search mandate, it was never part of the brief. I can confess to you that we do not want women candidates. But when we start presenting candidates and when they start seeing them on paper, we started to see different faces of our clients, different colors in their faces. And they start to create additional burdens, again, without explicitly expressing that they do not want women to take that role. Again, as I was inexperienced in the profession, it did not bother me for some time. But then it started to bother me because I started to feel, first of all, very selfishly, that I'm not doing my best. Because my job is to provide the best of talent and to get the best of the people I met and share them with the clients. And I started to be more vocal about that. I started to challenge people. And then there was really a breaking point in my life, which is year 2011. In that year, in Turkey, there was a new legislation for corporate governance, and independent board members become compulsory for listed companies. And at that time, as many cases, the legislation, when it was created, it was translated from different legislations from different countries. Probably the regulator either has forgotten or omitted wording saying, comply or explain. Please do appoint a female candidate to your board. If not, explain us why you're not doing this. And that was really the breaking point in my life, because after that legislation, rather surprisingly, you would not believe, and I couldn't believe at the time, but hundreds of companies explained their reason not to appoint female board members by saying that we searched so diligently, but we couldn't find the right candidate. There are no competent women who could take that board seat in our boards. And this was really frustrating. I mean, I don't want to speak in French, so excuse my French, but it is really frustrating. So then I started, okay, if you cannot find women, if you cannot find competent female candidates, then what we will do, we will create a pool of candidates for you. And right now, with the help of Sabancı University, one of the prominent universities in Turkey, we have created a pool of board-ready female candidates, some 300 of them. And as Egon Zender Turkey, we are providing this service without any fees. So it's totally free. If a listed company comes to us and asks for a female appointment of a board candidate, we say we'll be more than happy to support you. But surprise, surprise, every year we get 5 to 6 demands. And as we speak in Turkey, out of 420 listed companies, 139 of them have zero female candidates, zero female board directors on their board. And we still get 5 to 6 demands every year, despite the fact that it's totally free and we are more than happy to support them to increase their diversity at their board level. So this was really a breaking point in my life. Last but not the least, Zeynep, a personal front. When my daughter starts to grow and get older, she's now 18, I started to be more concerned and more conscious about this, because I start to think that what if that female, competent female professional is my daughter, who's not treated in the best way, in the diligent way, in the just way, and I cannot do anything about it. So that's what I'm trying to do now. And I think that is also an important breaking point in my personal journey.
Thank you for that, Murat. Yes, it's a very age-old excuse that we hear everywhere, that there are no eligible candidates. This is why, as EWOB, we actually have the commitment to have 1,000 board-ready female candidates by the end of 2023. So we never have to hear that excuse again across Europe as well. But I think you're absolutely right. So there's a very interesting saying by Bill Proudman. He suggests an analogy. He says that men are like fish in a fishbowl. Because they never have to leave, they never see the water that surrounds them, and they never understand the atmosphere that surrounds them. So basically, you referred also to unconscious biases, but do you feel that men are unaware of all these difficulties that women are going through, or do you think there is a conscious decision about causing these difficulties for women?
It's a difficult question to answer, especially to talk for all men. But my observation, if you asked me this question 20 years ago, I would say if there are really good female professionals who would be eligible for the role, they would probably take the role. So I was more like a purist, naive thinker. And there are still men like that among us. Therefore, that's still a possibility. And some of them are still thinking about it this way. Having said that, I openly heard from some senior male professionals saying that by doing what you are doing, you are closing your chances of getting board seats. And that's also a fear that some of them right now have. Because, and in fact, I'll give you an example of that, at least in my country, in my jurisdiction. You are aware of the fact. Now, for the last 10 years, if you look at the percentage of female board members in Turkey, this has evolved from around 10, 11% to 17%. But having said that, if you look at the size of boards in Turkey, that has also expanded with a similar pace. So actually, when they are appointing female board members, they are increasing the number of seats in many cases in the boards. They are not replacing men. But still, it's an instinctive fear that men have, that are we losing our power? That's another thing. But the most important one, I think the unconscious bias comes there. I gave the same example. I even tweeted about it. Think of those 139 boardrooms. When you look around in the boardroom, you see black street men all around you. Now, how can you not understand there's something weird about this? This is not normal. This is not normal. And therefore, when we talk about unconscious bias, it's a nice way to say, but I think it's pretty conscious that they know why they are there, or they know why they shouldn't let others go in. And when we talk about this topic, let me also expand the topic, because what I believe, it's not only about gender equality, it's totally a diversity and inclusion topic. So I don't think this is a journey of let's solve the gender equality issue and then we'll move to LGBTI and then age and then something else. We either solve it as one, so we create this diverse community which is inclusive, or we cannot solve it, and we are not solving it right now.
So true. Cannot agree more. It's a mindset issue. So if you solve the mindset, you solve it for all, right? Absolutely. So let's start talking a little bit about what we can do to overcome these. I think it's really important for us to understand at least the men that can be swayed. How can we get them on our side? Men like yourself, we also have many other male allies that are members of EWOB. How can we influence, first of all, men to support women more? And as a woman, what can we do to increase our career development opportunities by getting and enrolling the support of men? Do you think there's something that we can do on this front?
Well, Zeynep, I will be a bit bold about this because, as I said, after some 10 years of reading, talking, socializing, engaging with different people on this topic and looking at different geographies, and this is a beautiful group of people, so diverse from different backgrounds and geographies. I do not recall any country which has solved the board diversity issue without putting quotas. There is no example. Someone could say about the UK as an example, but there is another background story. If we have time, we can discuss. But apart from that, there is no country, as far as I know, which has solved this issue without some kind of regulative influence. Therefore, to your question, first of all, I don't think there is a way in our lifetime that we can manage to gain those men as allies, change their biases, and then make them think the way they should be thinking. I mean, the easy answer really, Justin Trudeau's, I love that quote, in 2015, when he announced his first cabinet, he was asked why there are so many women in the cabinet, and he said, it's 2015. We are living in the 21st century. Now it's 2022, and we are still in the same place. It's not changing, and it will not be changing. So from that perspective, let me say, as I said, the bold thing, I believe, without regulation, without quotas, it's not that easy to solve this issue. That for sure. Having said that, to answer your question, what we can do differently. One thing, referring to your previous question, often from chair people, the decision makers who are running the processes of nomination and appointees for the boards, most of them male, I hear the quote, we never thought there were so many competent female professionals after meeting the people that we present, the female candidates that we present. Therefore, one thing which is important, cross-injection between companies, between individuals, and making these senior male decision makers aware of the capabilities and diversity of the candidate pool. And what you are doing as a 1,000 candidate pool, that's great. What we have done is actually part of that. That's one thing. The second thing, I think, before making men allies, I think one other important part is, I believe it's strongly, the sisterhood, the collaboration between women. I don't think that's at its max. Therefore, there could be so many things happening on that front. So that's another thing that we can really think about and try to improve in a way that that would be really changing the topic or changing this issue. But I mean, we have to change the way we think, and that's really the diversity part that we can work on. In terms of maybe a corporate advice, the men in the corporate side, I think one thing that we should push for, diversity being part of the brand identity. So diversity is who we are. It's not something like we need to engage, increase the engagement, we need to this or that. This is not tactical. Diversity is who we are. So we should be promoting that in the organizations, in the environments, in the corporate environment that we are all in. I think that would also be something very critical. And the other thing, what I notice, especially in the corporates, this topic is often a tactical agenda item of HR. This is something that should be on the agendas of each and every senior executive, but also each and every person working for that company at all levels. This is not an HR issue. And therefore, pushing for that and taking it from HR and kind of rolling it out to a larger audience would help us to make this influence more strongly towards the male decision makers.
Absolutely, and it would be amazing if it were driven even by the CEOs themselves, which would make a huge impact, isn't it? So
one last point. Sorry to interrupt. One last point. I think one other thing which is important. We often hear comments about the current organizations, the current structures, or the past. Whereas, as a professional in this area, if you are hiring, you should be hiring for the culture of future, not looking at today. And the future is diverse, needs to be diverse. As I've said at the very beginning, with the current diverse problems of this world, we cannot tackle with people looking at it from just one angle. Therefore, we should also push people to consider hiring and expanding their forces with people who would be suitable or who would be evolving the culture of the future in organizations, not today's organizations. Because other way, they would look at the current organization and they would feel there are, let's say, 20% female, so we should hire 1 out of 5. And this goes like that with minimal steps. But we should think about the future. And the future, I think, is really parity, full stop.
Yeah, I love that mindset. I think it's a very different way of looking at HR planning. Thank you for that. So I'm going to give the word to Tamara. Tamara, there's a lot of excitement going on in the chat. Do you have any questions for Murat from the chat?
Yes, sure. So
Tamara, the easy ones, please.
Okay. So we have a question from Regina, which is, do you think male board members feel more solidarity with men and may think females would steal the job from a male? In times of equality, the privileged may feel discriminated. What are your thoughts on that?
I do agree. I do agree to an extent. It's a simple thing. I'm a bad engineer. I'm not a psychologist, but just like me, bias. So you want to have people around you who are like you, who think like you, who behave like you, who talk like you. And I think that's kind of instinctive, natural. But having said that, going back to my previous example, when you look around, you see so many men in one room, meeting every month, and you say nothing about this, you do nothing about it. That's odd. And that goes back to my point. That has been coming from this past, and we believe that it will continue going into the future. I think we need to think about what the future looks like.
Thank you for that. Christina, do you have any questions from the chat for us?
Yes, sure. So one question from Philippa. What's your advice for women to get men on their side in a very male environment?
I mean, once again, these are really difficult questions because, as I've said, how can I advise a woman in such a situation? But what I would at least suggest to consider, do not go into the 1-0 or polarized situation of discussing things with man-woman thing. Try to open larger topics. Try to surface the issue. Try to include larger group of people to this. Because otherwise, it's me versus you. And me usually is the decision maker. And therefore, I've known this, I've done this for so many years. What do you know about it? I've succeeded in this. What do you know about it? It's a difficult discussion. So I would rather dilute this problem, decrease the polarity of the problem, and include more people into the discussion. Last but not least, I don't need to tell you, but there are so many interesting research about the fact that, especially for the board level, the ideal minimum number of female board directors is 3 to maximize the effectiveness and impact of women at the board level. So if you have just women, it's more like, see, we have a woman board member. So it's like a representation, it's a display. And it's not easy, it's too much to expect from her to change the thinking way of men on herself. Therefore, increase the allyship. And again, I'm telling you, I would rather leverage sisterhood rather than attacking to the manhood for the first group.
Another issue that we face as women is finding sponsors sometimes. So do you think finding mentors is a good way to finding sponsors to help us through our careers?
It's an excellent way, Zeynep. That goes back to my point, because in that story, I mean, you are part of a big mentorship. You were and you're still part of the group where I was also quite influential for some time. I think the issue is that this is not just a mentorship, it's a two-way street. Therefore, when men, senior men, mentor female professionals who have the potential for boards or other responsibilities, to my previous point, they start to see the capabilities, they start to see the potential, and most importantly, they start to see the way they look at life. And that's really a kind of an implicit education process for those male mentors. Therefore, it's quite an effective process. But the most important part in that is the stability of the relationship. So when we talk about that, we're not looking for just a mentorship discussion once every year or once every couple of years. We're looking at a kind of a structured discussion, a relationship which is lasting, so that you will have the chance to express yourself to your mentor, and that would give him to look at world from your lenses. And that's very powerful.
Yeah, and with that relationship, we actually have the chance to influence quite a powerful man, right? Because we will be spending a lot of personal time, so maybe we can make him aware of the issues that we're facing, also for the benefit of other women, not just ourselves. So that's a good point. So back to you, Tamara. I know there's a lot of comments and questions on the chat. Anything you want to share from the chat, reflections, questions?
Yeah, sure. I can actually share one that's mine question. So would you ever suggest that we give up and try to change the culture in a company which seems too set in their ways? Would the market fix itself in a way, for example, with them struggling to hire or keep diverse staff?
Excellent question. Having said that, I mean, let me talk from where I sit. This is a country with huge economic issues, high unemployment, and yes, there is war for talent, but at the end of the day, it's an employer-dominated country. Therefore, regardless of how you look at diversity and inclusion, when you have vacancies, there will be a queue in front of the door. Therefore, that would be really a long process to leave it to the market mechanism to correct that. So I wouldn't advise that. And in fact, Keynes even said, I love that quote, in the long run, we are all dead. Therefore, do not let it to the market mechanism to correct these type of situations.
I love it. There's a lot of comments in the chat about sisterhood, and that's exactly one of the objectives of EWOB. So I love seeing all the comments. Christina, over to you. Do you have any reflections from the chat for us?
Yeah, so a reflection from Floriana. Another issue we face is once we have started the process and reached good results, we realize that women are reaching C-suite level, but not in business accountability positions. They are promoted in HR, communication, marketing, but if you look at P&L roles, then we still have a male predominant leadership. What's your thought on this, Murat?
I agree, but it's not, I mean, on that, I think it's about a kind of a longer term issue we are talking about, because the CXOs of today are actually the people who have more or less entered the workforce 20, 25 years ago. And if you look at the mindset in those years, the education areas and the preferences of female professionals, it's related with what you're saying. And now that is changing. That's first thing. The second thing, I think it's more than a diversity and gender equality issue, because in many situations as corporate leaders, we or you do not like cross fertilization. We would rather have senior level functional specialists who would run that function. So it's not that easy that you've been in HR for 25 years and then you are rotated to marketing or finance. It's not that much of a possibility. But having said that, if you look at the talents coming up, especially from marketing, to some extent in manufacturing, in services type of roles, you see more female professionals taking P&L responsibilities, assuming BU responsibilities, and becoming general managers. And we will see it more and more in the coming years. But that's another mindset shift. So it's kind of related with, if you look at the CEOs of maybe 10 years ago, you would see more commercial people. 20 years ago, you would see more manufacturing people. Whereas right now, we are seeing more consultants, digital people, and diverse capabilities. Therefore, this is more than a gender issue, what you are referring as.
So it's changing now.
It is changing, and it will change more rapidly in the future. But what I'm trying to say, the conscious or the unconscious bias there is more than the gender topic that we are talking about. It's more silo careers.
Speaking of unconscious biases, do you think unconscious biases can be broken on the corporate level? Is there something that corporations can do to fight this issue?
I think leader sets the tone. If you have the right leadership who believes in that and follows up towards that direction, it's possible. I'll give you a totally different example, which I love. And I'm not saying this favoring any company or any person, but Jeff Bezos, Amazon, says, I do 10,000 interviews and there are roles that I still do not hire any person. If you don't believe in that person, that 10,000 people to fill that role, you do not do a hiring. So rather than doing things wrong, just don't do it. Having said that, that's really the leader setting the tone. If the leader has the power and the tolerance level to do these kind of things, then it is possible. So if, going back to Christina's question, if the CEO says, regardless of any function or specialty, at the CXO level, when I hire someone or when I interview someone, I will want to have one diversity candidate, one internal candidate, one external candidate, at the least. So I want to see them in front of me, their CVs, and then I will start interviewing people. Now, if the CEO starts with that mindset, the CXO will follow, and then the directors will follow, and then the managers will follow. Because other way around, they know that what the CEO is expecting. It's not possible for them to say, you know, we looked so long hours and days, we couldn't find a female candidate. The CEO says, this is the rule. If you don't do it, then that role will stay empty as long as you cannot bring those three in front of me. So once again, it is possible, but it needs discipline, it needs resilience, it needs commitment, and that would only come if the person believes in that. And if the person believes in that, going back to my previous point, it unleashes all types of obstacles from the mind, and then you start to have a diverse and inclusive cultural organization.
Yeah, so we need enlightened men in senior positions. That's kind of the summary of what I hear from you.
Zeynep, I do agree. And by the way, we are meeting friends here. So I usually do not say this in public, but still I will say it here. Sometimes we see the same tendencies in female leaders at the top. Therefore, yes, this is not a woman issue. This is totally a male issue. I'm 100% behind it. So if we want to correct this, we have to change men. We have to change men's mindset. But there are low-hanging fruits where by just using that sisterhood, we can also influence some of the female leaders. So there's also some room for growth on that side. But once again, as I've said, I do not usually say this in public because it's so easy for men to just go behind it and say, see, it's not us, it's them also creating this problem.
Yeah, it's kind of pushing the problem in a different direction. I agree, but it is true. So back to you, Tamara. I think there's some new questions in the chat. What do you have for us?
Yes, so I think actually on the topic of just what you were talking about, how can we improve the women support women too? So this not just men, and that's from Merlin.
Well, it's a great question, and let me pose it to you. How can we do that? So, but I mean, just joking. I love Madeleine Albright's comments. There's a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. So that's really, I think, the essence of the story. But apart from that, we really need to find the way to collaborate and see each other as allies rather than competitors. I think that's a great starting point. And I've seen this happening in different NGOs and different type of initiatives. And I mean, I think Zeynep would correct me if I'm wrong, but it has an impressive way to accelerate the growth. Because when we are together, we're really stronger. And by doing that, we can go forward. Now, one thing I think, Zeynep, to your initial metaphor about the fishbowl, one thing about that, and this is my hypothesis, again, any of you correct me if I'm wrong, but as women pass through so many challenging things throughout their lives and careers, they really grasp what they get. And they're really protective about what they have. Rightfully, because they've really worked hard to get those. And in that sense, they find this a bit kind of, you know, my territory, and I don't want to really want anyone to influence into that territory. And that creates some turfs that make it difficult for sisterhood, collaboration, and other things. Whereas on the other hand, those men who are in the fishbowl, as you described, they don't care that much because, you know, they're in a group and they're picked from that group. If it's not this turn, it will be the next turn. So the effort that as a gender that they spend is not even comparable to what woman has paid for that. And therefore it's relatively easier for them for doing some kind of compromises.
Yeah, but it seems almost counterintuitive, but there the sisterhood is even more important in order to increase the opportunities, right? Because supporting each other is going to move the agenda forward. That's the only way.
And there's another thing. I mean, the famous saying, the grass is always greener on the other side. Now think about you introducing one of your colleagues to your boss as a potential director or board member. Whereas promoting yourself and saying, you know what, I'm ready for this board member role. Which one is easier?
It's a fair question. You've started to ask the difficult questions, Murat.
I'm reading the chat.
Yes, amazing comments in the chat. Maybe it's a good point to go to Christina again. Christina, any reflections from the chat for us?
Yeah, I have one for you, Murat. Hope it's an easy one, as you requested. If we refer to the tangible support that men in leadership positions can provide, such as sponsorship, championing for female talent, do you think it should be better handled at the organization level in terms of should it be set as an objective, or and how should this be measured?
If I understand the question right, maybe continuing with the previous comment I made, this goes from top to bottom. I think the leader should set the objectives. And I do not really, although it's important to run after objectives as part of results orientation, I don't think the issue is counting the heads. It's more breaking the unconscious biases and being inclusive in the organization. Diversity is probably the easiest part to comply with when we really accomplish getting rid of unconscious biases and being an inclusive community. Therefore, objectives are important, but I don't think objectives are sustainable if we cannot solve the other two. Just for an example, for the sake of discussion, as an example, if you let me being the guardian of the waiting room of this Zoom call and give me the authority and the discipline, I can create any kind of composition in the room just by accepting or rejecting people. It could be gender, it could be education, it could be age, it could be identity, nationality, you name it. If you give me that discipline and the authority, that's so easy to do. But is this sustainable? It's not sustainable. Therefore, the other issue is to have this wonderful group, like a rainbow, so many colors here, and like we are doing now, motivating and ensuring them we will really enjoy this ride, and they will contribute, and we will all get our best from this ride. That's the inclusive part. And people should feel to express themselves comfortably. And if we do that, we should not care about how many women is in there, how many men is in there. Therefore, to the question, yes, objectives are important. Yes, we should follow up the objectives, but the objectives or satisfying the objectives would not solve the issue sustainably.
So I have a different one for you. The title of your book is Gosh, the CEO is Pregnant. It is a controversial one, isn't it? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm a humble author of a book which was published 3.5 years ago. As you say, that's the translation. The title comes from actually a real story. The story of Marissa Mayer. Some of you, maybe all of you would know, the ex-CEO of Yahoo. When Marissa Mayer was first appointed as CEO to Yahoo, more than her being first CEO assignment and being one of the youngest, if not the youngest CEO of Fortune 500 companies, what was more discussed was she was pregnant when she accepted the offer of Yahoo, and she was on her maternity leave making the transition. So this has been a huge discussion. But after 2.5 years, she announced again that she's pregnant for twins now. And this was a big thing in US, even globally. And this was such a big thing that rumor is that SEC, the regulator in US started an investigation to look at if the CEO is pregnant in a listed company, would this have a negative effect on the investors, especially the minority investors? Well, you are laughing, some of you are laughing, but this is the real thing. Now, after this, hearing about this, Marisa Mayer said that, you know what, don't worry. I will just use 2-3 weeks of my maternity leave and then I'll come back. This time, feminist organizations, NGOs started to explode and say, this is your happiest time. Why are you cutting your maternity leave so short? Why are you just spending time with your twins? Now, it's a story that the CEO should probably get pregnant by getting the approval from SEC, by getting the approval from minority shareholders, by getting the approval of feminists. Oh gosh, the CEO is pregnant. It's the worst thing in the world. Now, it's the worst thing in the world. Luckily, it's not happening that frequently because the number of female CEOs is so small. I mean, US makes these interesting research. As far as I looked last time, in Fortune 500, the name of CEOs with John, the number of them is higher than female CEOs. Same goes, by the way, for Republican senators. So this is a real issue. So, oh gosh, the CEO is pregnant is actually a satire that I kind of brought forward to kind of put it forward as to the interest of the public.
Yeah, we have some examples coming in the chat as well. I have personally been pregnant in a C-level position. So what you're saying actually reflects a lot. There's a lot of stigma attached to it. So thank you for bringing that out to the public.
I have a personal example as that, Zeynep. I was writing weekly articles in a national paper some years ago. And I actually shared this Marisa Mayer example. And then there was a flood of messages coming from different female professionals in different industries. One of them was exactly as you say, this lady, she got pregnant, she was on maternity leave, she came back, and when she was on maternity leave, she was promoted. And she came back with such pride, such energy, so happy, and she had her first meeting with her boss. And then she goes to her office and she starts looking at the new job, the responsibilities. And at that point, she realizes that in order to do the job, she has to travel at least 2 weeks a month in the coming 6-8 months. She goes back to her boss's room and she says, boss, probably there's an issue, there's a misunderstanding. You know, I'm giving milk to my babies. Therefore, I cannot do this. And the boss says, no problem, you will give that milk when you come back 2 weeks later. This is a real case. This is a real example. So there are so many of them happening. And this is an example, by the way, I mean, underlining the fact that the company actually promoted her. So they appreciate her. They are a kind of an inclusive company. So in many situations, I've seen examples of companies not promoting people who are on maternity leave, or wait them to come and re-justify their presence and then consider promotions.
Thank you. It's definitely one of the elephants in the room. So going back to the chat, Christina, do you have any other questions for us from the chat?
I have one. Yes, sure. So from Rhonda, a question: what is your opinion on linking executive compensation to achieving gender-balanced leadership to move the needle quicker?
Very good question.
Excellent question. I mean, I don't have an expert answer to that because Compemben is something bigger than what I do. So I'm not an expert in that. Having said that, the answer is not a scientific or an expert one. I think, as I have mentioned before, without putting extreme measures and regulations to the topic, it's not that easy to solve the issue. Therefore, as I have mentioned, objectives, targets, they are not the solution. But having said that, kind of linking these with some upside potential for individuals is important. And it's an important part of the thing. But once again, I would not just do this. I would rather promote the diversity as the culture and then have these type of measures. So if you just put this as something, this would take extreme criticism from everyone in the organization, and rightfully. This could be one of many things the organization could do. But I think, once again, I would rather rely on the leader to set the tone. And rather than punishing, it could be possible to incentivizing the people or the organizations or the groups of people who have achieved this. So extra bonuses, extra budgets, or whatever could be provided to the parts that have done this.
Thank you for that, Murat. Tamara, you have some points for us?
Yes. So as you mentioned, you keep talking about, obviously, the target of actual inclusiveness. So we have a question from Dominique, which is, diversity targets are easier to set and realize than the target of actual inclusiveness of females in board decision-making. Do you know a board chairman or some example that could reflect on this based on their own experience and effort-making?
Sorry, the second part of the real question. Do I know a chairperson
who has done this and can reflect on this, or if nothing else, an example of maybe a company who's done it right, for example, that I added that part on, if you don't know.
There are few in the local environment that I am here, but let me correct myself. I don't want to give the wrong impression. When I talk about inclusiveness, I'm talking about the whole organization. I'm not talking about the board inclusiveness. So when I'm talking about diversity and inclusion, I'm talking about, so it's not that logical to have such a diverse board, but in the organization, it's totally a different game. So leader sets the tone, but he or she has to roll this down to the larger organization. Therefore, let me correct that if that's the impression I gave. I think that was not what I meant. What I meant is the whole organization being inclusive and diverse. One of the chairpersons right now, Zeynep also knows, is a person called Mr. Murat Ülker, who's a local entrepreneur. And he has a very pragmatic and business-oriented approach looking at this issue. He's one of the, or if not the biggest consumer goods empire in Turkey, so to say. And what he says, 70% of my clients are women. 80% of the decisions to purchase my products are given by women. Therefore, I need to have at least parity, if not more, at my boards. So this is a pragmatic way of looking at the organization, and he's doing that. Another chair, CEO/chair, is a person called Mr. Ahmet Dördüncü, again from our local organization, who's a professional executive chair. So he's not like a shareholder or investor. And he's probably the person who has made the most cross injection of the female talent in different organizations. So he kind of created his mandate as introducing senior, competent female professionals to his peer CEOs. And he's doing it. And same goes for his organization. If you look at this CXO, more than half of them are female professionals. So there are good examples. And if you look at these good examples, actually, they all say, one is, as I've given you the example, it's a business imperative. For the other one, he says, when working with female professionals, I get the best performance. And he is the one to experience that. Now, I'm not in a situation to say female professionals are better than male. What I'm trying to say, female professionals should have at least as much opportunity and rights as the male professionals. That's the gender equality I understand. So I'm not talking about who's better, who's worse. And in different situations, this could be different. But to have this in the mind, And to remind yourself of doing this each and every day, I think is the important step forward. And as I've said, I can increase the number of examples. Some of them might be irrelevant for many of the people in the audience because they are local examples.
There's an international example as well in the chat given by Patricia. Thank you for that, Patricia. It is MasterCard, where she's informing us that it needs to be in the employees' objectives and compensation at all levels at MasterCard. So there are companies that are finding the path to this, to making this much more.
It's not surprising. It's not surprising because the CEO, deputy CEO or deputy chair of MasterCard is also the chairperson of 30% Club now and Keynes. Therefore, okay. It's not surprising, but it's a great example.
And maybe it's also a good example of how we can start institutionalizing these things in the corporate level and driving from the top of the organization, as per your earlier point. That's great. So we're starting to run out of time. I'm going to give the word back to Christina again. Christina, do we have any further questions from the chat that we still haven't addressed? We're still asking difficult questions to Murat. Keep them coming.
Not really a question, maybe just a reflection that, yeah, from Filipa, working in a very male environment is challenging, even when polarization isn't practiced. Even when women are delivering good work, male-dominated environments tend to push women down. Something that, yeah, has to change in coming years.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Tamara, coming back to you, any points from your side?
Sure. It's also more reflections and similar. There was a comment, sorry, I can't tell the full name of the person based on their Zoom name, but it says the comment was always in terms of pregnancy. In case of a pregnancy, one has a month or more to plan the replacement of the assignment. A heart attack or a sports injury is announced the night before. So in a sense, there is a way to plan for these things. And it's not as big of a risk as people see it. So on that one,
it's an interesting comment, but that gives me the chance to maybe comment something related with that. Not to the person who kind of wrote this, but in business world, funnily enough, maternity leave is seen as a health condition. It's not that sickness we are talking about. We are probably talking about the happiest moment of a woman and a man. But we are now thinking about whether it's a heart attack, is it an injury, how long will you be out of work, how long will it take you to recover? This is also related with the mindset that we have. Yes, it might be an interruption, but it's not a sickness we are talking about.
So many things to change in the mindset, right? I think it's almost like we need a complete new mindset. Maybe one last question from my side, Murat. So you are here listening, chatting with the members of European Women on Boards. Given your experience on women in boardrooms in Turkey, do you have any advice for European Women on Boards on how what we can do to further this agenda with the help of male allies? So in a way, can EWOB do something to increase the male allyship from your experience?
Well, once again, I'm already humbled to be here, so it's a big question. I don't want to kind of answer that question with big words, but maybe two practical and pragmatic suggestions. The first one, for the individuals. What I notice still, many of the board, let's say, invitations go to male candidates primarily, often. It's the case. Having said that, if you look at the evolution of corporate governance in different countries, the dance card of these male candidates are already more than full. And therefore they cannot take another seat. Now, in your own countries, if you have the possibility to influence or even to inform about your presence and capabilities to these popular board candidates, male candidates, or even female candidates, but often they are male. I think it's a great opportunity and a practical opportunity to be in the share of mind of these people, because often they would say, you know what, I cannot take this additional seat, but why don't you contact Zeynep? I know her, she's great, and she would definitely do this job. So a practical, pragmatic advice to just identify these people who are quite popular in your own markets, especially in the outset of listed companies, and try to get in contact with them and influence them or let them know about your presence and capabilities and aspirations. On the more organizational and corporate front, about the organization, my humble advice would be to go back to the initial point, and if you have the chance to go and try to influence some of these corporates with the help of or with the leverage of the organization, it could be more impactful compared to individual efforts of all your members. So as EWOB, if it's possible for you to maybe first contact them, or ideally organize some events, or maybe have meetings with them. And by the way, some of them could even be your employers. But still, what you say at the beginning, Zeynep, having 1,000 board-ready female candidates in a pool is a powerful resource. At least let them know about this resource. I think that's a great starting point, because that kind of closes the excuse about, well, we cannot find them. Yes, we have them, and we'll help you to find them. And you can always start with the ones which has the least women on their boards. So that would be the two that I would kind of share as closing remarks.
Thank you, Murat. That's indeed very pragmatic and helps a lot to shape the way. So in the last 2 minutes, I just want to ask Christina and Tamara, are there any burning comments or points that you want to make before we close?
Not from my side. Thank you.
No, I wouldn't say anything. I guess I can just add this comment that I put in the chat as well, that it's also important to infuse inclusion and diversity into procurement processes. It's not just about our company, but also who you choose to partner with.
Absolutely. And maybe expand that. I mean, Zeynep, you can maybe comment on it more. As far as I know, Unilever is part of a big coalition of suppliers and procurement partners, and they kind of promote purchasing from female-friendly organizations. And it's a great way to show that commitment. And again, leader sets the tone. But if you are part of this, if you are doing, because we are talking about an ecosystem, many of your companies are already aware of this. Many of your organizations have been doing things about that. But when you go one step down to your suppliers, it's less of a story. Therefore, increasing that impact towards that direction could be really impactful.
Absolutely. It's all part of the same mindset issue, right? You know, once you have the mindset, you just start reflecting in every single channel that you have, either in the company or outside. So great. With that, Murat, I want to really thank you very much on behalf of EWOB. I see many thank you notes in the chat. I hope you see them too. Everybody found the discussion stimulating. Thank you so much for your candor, for your comments, and for all the honesty you've given us in this session. Very happy to have you with us today.
Zeynep, I also want to thank you and just exemplify what I'm sharing. If a man was moderating this session, we would have another half an hour and we would still go with the questions, but it's like sharp, like a Swiss clock. At 12:30, we have completed it. So wonderful job. Thank you and well done.
Thank you. That's kind of you. And I see one comment here that you would love, in case you missed it, that your daughter will be proud of you for doing the work that you do. And I completely agree with that.
Thank you to the person who said that.
Yes, indeed. So, ladies, this is the end of our session. Just to remind you, those who have signed up with Murat for the private session will go to a different room. And those who want to stay behind and want to learn a little bit more about European women on boards, dear Edwige is here. She's our chair and a wonderful person to talk about EWOB in case you have any questions and interested in learning more about us. So with that, I want to thank everyone for your time, for attending, and hope to see you at the next event. Bye.
Okay, Tamara, you're moving around everyone. Hello, Marina, nice to see you. Hello, Noha, Anka. It was a really nice session, wasn't it?
It was great, really. You know, we have to talk with European men as well, because
Yes.
it's so strange, different cultures, but we see a lot of, you know, intelligence and understanding, and it's quite surprising. Yesterday, I talked to one woman from the States, and she told me that I have an app, and she worked for it during 3 years, and every time she is asking for investments, they are talking, okay, but when they found the founder is a woman, she was rejected all the time. I told, I can't imagine. Is it modern time? Look, see, I don't want to compare, but we know the condition of women and in Turkey. But right now we see such a progressive man with such a beautiful ideas, and that's really amazing.
Oh, it's really nice. And Zeynep, of course, knows Murat for a long time, but it's very, that's what we will try to do more, to have also male allies and male speakers. So thank you so much for staying in the room. So you've heard it from Zeynep. We really want to move forward now and have those 1,000 talented women. It's one of the very important objectives of European Women on Boards. And so far we have approximately 400. So we will be recruiting very heavily as much as we can in the next months. And as Zeynep says, our objective is to have 1,000 women by the end of 2023. And so to do this, talented women, meaning women eager to move to a C-level position or a board level position. So European Women on Boards, we very much focus on the highest decision-making positions, because we all know that at the start, women are now a majority. So if you look at universities, women is approximately 55 to 60%. So I don't know whether you know that, it's a big majority of women. But each step you take in the companies, or in politics or public authorities, women drop out. So at the top of companies, in executive level, we are approximately at 20%, some countries 10%. At board level, approximately 30%. And we want to change that. And we have like 4 objectives set for EWOB. First, a talent pool of 1,000 women, and I will tell more what we do then to help the women. Second, policy change, and that we had a big win last month. We have been advocating for a directive at European level, and that now, after 10 years, we managed to get that right. So it means that in Europe, we will have now a target of 40% men, 40% women in every stock listed company across the union. And that has to be realized by mid-2026. It's a big win for our organization, and it stimulates us to be really ready with women who want it, who are ready, who are eager. The third objective is we want to move and to include as many countries as we can in Europe. So we are expanding our organization with partnerships in as many countries in Europe. And when I started as a chair together with Kristen, we were in 5 countries. Now we are already active in 15. And our target is to be at least in 20 by the end of next year. So it's really important. So we have now partners in Poland, in Sweden, in France, in the UK, so name it. And we are continuing that expansion. And the last driver is what we discussed today. We want to partner with as many companies and executive search firms, because if we have companies willing to diversify, looking for talent or looking to train their women, it's very powerful. And same with executive search firms. We want as many as executive search firms looking to work together with EWOB so that we can facilitate the matchmaking, share our talent pool with them, make it more easy for women to reach out to a headhunter, prepare them for a conversation, and also convince headhunters to publish figures. How many women in your database? How many women do you interview? How many women do get nominations? And so to respond to the question on Ukraine, we do not really have an organization in Ukraine, but we have done many actions to actually look for networks, or at least women who could help us identify female business women who would like to have some help or a guiding advice. And so we worked together with 2 or 3 ladies, and we did set up a mentoring program for displaced Ukrainian women, and we have been able to help already more than 100 Ukrainian women. So of course, we are a non-profit organization, non-political, so we did not take a stance. But we thought, what can we do for Ukraine? We have women in all industries and all countries. So we offer free mentoring, free programs for displaced Ukrainian women. So it's women helping women, exactly as what Murat was saying. But so, to come back, 1,000 talented women, that's what we are looking for. So how do we do this? We have an individual membership program that is as inclusive and accessible as we can. So it's €200 for a full year, and all events are included. The 2 monthly events, workshops, online learning platform. You can reach out to all 400 women. Every woman in our community is open for a question or help. If you want more, if you have more time or you have more money to spend, there are I would say more intense programs for C-level or board readiness program or mentoring. But basically the idea and the mission of EWOB is really to make that next step, women who want to advance in their career, to make it as accessible as possible. So that's basically how it works. So Anke, I think you've heard a little bit already from EWOB. So what do you like about EWOB, and what do you think about the idea of EWOB?
I would like to say that I'm impressed with the high level of discussion and preparation which are taking place, which is indeed another step in the professional development. It's also making a point of in making also the females or me think more about it's not so. I do have also an MBA, probably like 99% of all engineers, right? So I understand the figures and what's all about, but really try to have this mindset to say, well, I'm in charge of it, right? Now what? Yeah, which is also sometimes the people are saying you have to vision yourself in the position, right? And the discussion and the topics which are placed, it's really making one think about it. And also what there are 2 points which one, it was I wanted to learn a little bit more about your programs, the C-level one and the board readiness. Yeah, what is the difference between the two of them? This is the one, and the other one is when you say that you want to work with companies, what do you really expect? Because I think this is a program which even my company here in Europe will be interested to learn more about it. But I would like to also be able to tell them what's in it for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Because yes, they want to promote female and they want to whatsoever, but then all of a sudden you have the dialogue with the people who probably could be replaced by a female.
No, we understand the point. So first thing first, so the individual membership and everything in EWOB is based on the 5 steps you need to take to the next level. So that's basically the red line that you will always find. And it's that becoming more conscious of how you can build your career. And the 5 steps are actually always the same. The first is take stock of your own skills, what you did so far, but do that in a more systematic way. So what are your skills? What role did you play? What geographies do you know? What industries have you been familiar with? So it is taking you on the path to just make it more clear what you have been doing so far. The second step is figure out what you want. What do you want? It may seem a silly question, but many women that I have always 30 minutes talk with each new member. What do you want? And can you say that in a concise form that I can understand in 1 minute or 5 minutes? What do you want? What is the next step you want? And we can help figure